Morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. It looks like I'm getting screwed again on the preloading of your good morning comments. So, the thing I love to do, which is read your good mornings, I can't do anymore. I don't know what's up. Good morning, surf's up. Life is good, Robert. Robert, it is indeed. Yeah, I can see it for like 1 second, and then they all vanish. So, not even enough time to see who it was. It just comes and goes straight when I connect. It's really frustrating. Beaumatin, good morning, Bitcoiners. We'll repeat them. Thank you, Bitcoin Graffiti. Yes, I think I can only read them when you're live now. As much as I love seeing the comments that load right when I get in there, I don't know what is up. That's okay. We're going to live. Greetings and salutations, Richard King. Good morning, Christine. Yeah, we love to hear from all of you. Good morning from Illinois. We love Illinois, Kevin. Let me just check what people are saying over on Rumble, because I check that directly. I might move back to the Rumble studio soon, because indeed I like getting the comments from every section, from every channel. And that's one nice thing that Rumble Studio does. And it puts the extinguish button. Like, I can make my comments just stay up there for a minute and I don't have to take them down. Not that it's a big deal to keep seeing the comments there, but I mean, sometimes it's out of context and it's up there for a little too long. Don Boli says, hello, gang. Drew says, hola, bought the dip 100%. Yeah, I did too. I had a little buy moment this morning. Couldn't help it. When life gives you Bitcoin, you should take it indeed, French fry. Connecteur says, bonjour, y'all. Bonjour indeed. Seaberger, Bitcoin is destiny. It sure is. Good afternoon, Sluggo says, shalom from Israel. Lucky says, thank you for coming, Lucky. Good morning, Japanese pensioners. We're talking about them today. We're talking about the Japanese. Bitcoin Graffiti says, lots of joggers in Barbados. Yeah, Barbados, it's one of the things I love about Barbados. The local folks here, it's very integrated, let's say. It's not like tourists versus locals. Locals enjoy the beach like everyone, fill the restaurants like everyone. It's not quite the same as a lot of the islands around here. So lots of joggers, lots of swimmers. The beach is always filled. And this is a very, let's say, local beach. Not exactly where I am, although the club I'm a member of is all locals. But a lot of people in and out too, like myself. But the whole beach, yeah, filled all the time. We love it. Good morning. My speech on here is concerning to the people in power. If they're reading, here's a message for them. Please, kindly, fuck off. Yes, indeed, Jeffy. Indeed. We're not fans of anyone screwing with our morning messages. Right now, I got to warn you. I'm telling you right now, the sun is up. Bitcoin's running, but I don't have a coffee again. I didn't, it's a big thing for me to bring it down. They're not going to be open here. So please enjoy your coffee. And we're still going to talk about what's new. I'm going to figure out this coffee thing with my new system. I didn't feel like bringing it over today. So there you go. There you go. Richard says, I bought at the top. So did I, man. Don't worry about it. Maybe near the top. I think I got lucky on I need to hire a servant now. No servants. We got a cleaning lady. That's good enough. All right, that's good enough. No butler. The Butlerian jihad. All right, we're not doing it. Bitcoin runs 24/7 and never pulls a hamstring. There's a lesson in there. Yeah, we're going to be talking about hamstrings as well. But first, let's get to the fakest news I could find for the day. What do we got? It says here, fashion. Return of the dad bod. Survey finds people prefer a softer male body type. Try that. It's going to work. New York Post writes, new exercise pill could replace physical benefits of working out. Wow, I could take a pill and not work out. But why don't I just go with the dad bod? We don't know. This one's good. America, this is from the New York Times opinion section. America, I don't know if you guys knew this. Ready? America has no official language. Instead, it has hundreds. Hundreds. Oh, this is one of my favorite. All right. This is absolutely one of my favorite. Yesterday, they were talking about bloodbath, the whole bloodbath. They had to do another day of bloodbath content. It wasn't enough over the weekend with the bloodbath. We got more bloodbath content yesterday, and Joe Scarborough was trying to explain to his audience, right? He was trying to explain to his audience that he knew what Trump meant. He knew. And so he said that all the people who thought the bloodbath comment was really about the auto industry, remember, they could never show the video on the fake news. They could never show, because you couldn't RuPaR it as well as you could the Charlottesville hoax one, right? The Charlottesville hoax one, Trump's mistake, if you want to call it that, is he says, I denounce white supremacists with a delay in the text when he said very fine people. So that's what they use. That's how they RuPaR'd the edit, right? That's how they cut the edit to make sure that no one knew he was talking about the white supremacists. And his exact quote, who I condemn totally, or whatever like that. So this one was harder to RuPaR. It was harder to edit and cut out. So no one's ever actually seen the video on the fake news. So if you go on the fake news and try and see any of this, they will never show the video, but they'll just tell you what's in it, right? And they'll do some mind reading. It's quite perfect. But as Joe Scarborough was trying to explain to his audience, right, that everyone who fell for anyone who watched the video and came away saying bloodbath meant in the auto industry, he says, these people may be stupid, but we're not. Thank you, Joe. He insists he's not stupid. I believe him. Right? You're not stupid. This one's great. So the cross-eyed fat AG from New York, who I'm not sure is literate, had this to say about Trump not being able to post the bond for his appeal. She says, New York Attorney General Letitia James has been clear on what she is prepared to do if and when former Trump comes up empty-handed. She says, I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day. Please, Letitia, you fucking cross-eyed fat bitch, please take one of Trump's buildings. It will be hilarious. You gotta do it. That's all I want. So Letitia, this one's great. This one's really a lot of fun. Okay, so you know how I always talk about Canada and the fake news and CTV and CBC and how Canada's filled with some very low IQ individuals. This Moscow Time is for all of you who want to see just how far behind mentally handicapped Canadians are, right? So imagine presenting this as news. Imagine you wrote an article and you published it. Think about how, and you wrote the following article. Think about how informed you would feel. CTV News has a headline. It's a headline, and it's this. Who is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and why is he running for president? They don't even know who he is. This is how far behind they actually are. Who is Robert Kennedy? Who is he? I don't know. It's so good. Who is he? We don't know. Here's what they say in the article. It's quite good. Here's what they have to say about who Robert Kennedy is. He's a royalty, they say, in the Canadian family, in the American political family. This is what they say in CTV News. Along the way, his activism has veered into conspiracies and contradicted scientific consensus. No way! Scientific consensus? No, most infamously on vaccines. Some members of his family have publicly criticized his views. Wah, wah. Dozens of his family members posed with Senator... This is how they're introducing him. This is it. Dozens of his family members posed with U.S. President Joe Biden at a St. Patrick's Day reception at the White House in a photo his sister Carrie Kennedy, posted to the social media. Then they go on about his stuff with Children's Health Alliance defense and the lawsuit of COVID-19. Who is working for him? They don't give any of these people much credit. But how informed Canadians must be that they're just hearing about Kennedy now on CTV. Thank you, CTV. It's excellent. Now, everyone, of course, talking also yesterday about the Don Lemon Elon Musk interview. It finally was totally published, so you could see the whole thing. I watched bits and pieces. I can't deal with Don Lemon for that length of a time. It's just too much for me, right? But Washington Post, here's what they have to say. On Monday, Don Lemon released the wide-ranging interview with Elon Musk that prompted the billionaire to cancel X's deal with a former CNN anchor last week after Musk disliked his lines of inquiry. Here are the takeaways from Lemon's conversation with Musk, and they have 5 big takeaways. What's in them? Musk resists responsibility for hate speech on X. That's the number one takeaway, according to the Washington Post, that Musk has resisted responsibility for hate speech on X. It's so good. The next one, what's number 2? Musk experiences depressive episodes. Number 3, Musk described his meeting with Trump. And then the thing they take issue with is that he says to Don Lemon, America needs to move on from racism, Musk says. So there you go. That's what the Washington Post had to say about Elon Musk and the Don Lemon interview. It was really nice stuff. It was really good. Now, everyone else had stuff to say about it, and it wasn't what the Washington Post came up with. Some really smart people had a lot to say. We're going to talk about Beauty On and a few others who had an impression of this. But let me just start with some of the impressions that I got, and then I'll share my own. Farzad says, so happy Don Lemon and Elon Musk interview dropped. Fascinating display of logic versus emotion. Became clear Elon was getting tired of Don's inability to view the world through his lens and kept trying to push his lens, one that views everything through race and sex, as the only right way to view the world. This is at the core of so many issues with our society today, in my opinion. The inability for some to accept the fact that there are many out there that don't care about race, sex, orientation, and are solely interested in the merits of a person. That's it. It was obviously very difficult for Don to understand this, and thus by default, it's likely that Elon is sexist, racist, or both. That's my takeaway. Fascinating stuff, he says. Ed Snowden had a really good take. I'm going to read you Ed Snowden's take. So Ed Snowden says, look, I've been in the controversial interview seat. What Don Lemon came after Elon Musk felt like malice. Elon, in clear discomfort, opens up in good faith about intensely private struggles. Lemon picks precisely that moment to begin emptying the entire drawer of knives. That's a dick move, sure, but it's Lemon's right. It comes with the territory of being a partisan football, and Musk should have expected it. The real loss is that it's a huge waste of an interview because Lemon exhibits zero curiosity or interest in anything beyond his point. You've got one of the world's most influential men in front of you, on camera with his shields uncharacteristically down. There's rapport. You can get genuine, unconsidered answers, explore his unguarded thought and beliefs. Instead, you just slap him until his gloves come up. Imagine pivoting directly from the interview subject, confiding in you about his depression, to, so you really hate Jews, huh? Here's 10 bad tweets from 1997 and a study that says you're a bad person. You masturbate to hate speech, don't you? That's what Lemon did. Lemon had the shields down and could have actually gotten real serious responses to his real and serious criticisms. That's the tragedy of the spectacle. It's not what the questions are, but what the interviewer was. What a waste. I wouldn't have bought him a car. Now, I don't believe the rider thing. I'm a little unconvinced about it. I'll say that again in a few minutes. And then finally, this was my favorite take because it squares everything into a Bitcoin lens, comes from Beauty On. Beauty On said, this clip is a distillation of the fundamental incompatibilities of Democrats and normal people. Democrats don't understand the basics of Americanism or rights. They don't believe that there are absolutes like right and wrong. Everything is a matter of perspective, nuance, open to interpretation. Every perversion, distortion, and evil is permissible. Don Lemon literally can't understand obedience to the law as a standard because he believes that there are no real laws at all, or natural order, or right and wrong. That is the philosophy that molds him, is the darkness that is his guiding light. It is why Lemon and Elon cannot get along or live together in a society. This is why the ultimate solution is for Lemon and his class to live amongst people like Lemon, and the Elons, the Joneses, the Owens, Pauls, and everyone else lives in another society so that these two incompatible philosophies never have to mix. It would ultimately, sadly, end with the Lemons coming to get goods and services from the Elons, because as you've seen with Lemon's absurd rider demands, they are uneconomic, irrational, illiterate, innumerate, and unable to understand the value of anything. And you can forget about going to the dentist in Lemonland. Compare and contrast Carlson, who wanted nothing other than the opportunity to be on X and publish. This is the essential difference between the Lemon class and the Carlson class. The Carlson class creates value, sails the seas, builds nations, builds multi-story buildings, creates movable type, the steam engine, and writing. The Lemon class can't even produce lemonade. Never mind the mental squeezers, refined sugar, refined clear glass jugs, ice, or anything else that's required to eye pencil a lemonade stand. This painful, unpleasant reality is what is going to power the bifurcation, where the productive Atlas Shrugged style separate off into a superior parallel society with high walls and death machine border security to protect them from the lemon class, who are incompatible, intolerable, intolerant, insufferable, ignorant, infantilized, imbecilic, idiotic, and boring. Boring. That's the number one thing. They're boring. These are very boring people, right? Not interesting at all. Now, indeed, I used to think before COVID, for example, that we could get sort of a pleb revolution. We could save the whole world. COVID proved to me that indeed it's not going to go that way. We've got to focus on the ETF issuing folks, the people who want to preserve their wealth, the energy industry. I always thought we had this opportunity to take a route that was either both ways, but I've become squarely into the bifurcation camp. And I mean, I hope it doesn't necessarily go that way. It's one of the reasons why I still now really do believe in UBI. What are the Don Lemons going to do? What are we going to do with them? I'm serious. What are we going to do with these people? They're irredeemably stupid. So are we going to let them all perish? I don't really want to do that either. So I think we are just going to give them some UBI. We are just going to give them political money. We are entering a bifurcation of humanity, which will be underlined by bimetallism. So the double money system, which we're going to talk about more today, because it looks like that's where things are headed in Japan and other places. So when I talk about bimetallism, what I mean is political money, fiat, right? Political money, pure political money, turning itself into food stamps to make sure the Don Lemons of the world have something to eat and we don't need what Beauty On just said here, death machine border security, which I will also embrace if we need to, right? If it's a survival question, then what are we going to do? If there isn't UBI for them, if there isn't some way to take care of them, then what are we supposed to do, right? So the idea here being that the bifurcation of humanity will actually be along the lines of Bitcoin and the money that powers both the psychology of Bitcoiners and the psychology of the fiat-minded. What am I supposed to do? What's the plan? Where's my food stamps? And you can kind of see it go throughout the system. I mean, the reason why, and this is, I'm not sure, an older quote from Christine Lagarde, but it's something that she said, and people were talking about it yesterday. Bitcoin Archive was sharing, and he says, convicted criminal, an ECB president, Christine Lagarde on Bitcoin. So here she's talking, and in her really, low IQ European way. And I don't think she's a very smart person. So she might have, we'll see, but IQ wise, but nothing she's ever said impresses me. Right. So we were just, Rake Man and I were just talking about Bitcoin before. I talked to everyone here about Bitcoin, obviously. Right. So Christine Lagarde comes here and says, she says on this interview, on this clip, she talks about how we need a global response to Bitcoin, that all the governments in the world have to work together in order to stop Bitcoin. And the reason she says it is because if there's an escape, the escape will be used, right? So she understands the entire field of battle now that we're in. And what she's saying is if you allow humanity to bifurcate into two financial systems, the able people will do it. So I've been saying for a long time that World War III, the belligerents that we're going to remember, the belligerents of World War III are not two parties. It's actually three. It's the All-Eyes, which used to be known as the Allies in World War II. They're the All-Eyes now. So the All-Eyes are one of the parties. These are the Western nation states. And then you've also got the Axis, which I call the Gs, the G team, right? Axis. And if you take away the A and you put XI, it's the Gs. It's the Chinese system, right? So the Chinese system is a part of this. That would be the more efficient version of the All-Eyes. And then finally, you've got the Ables. It's the Axis, the Allies, the All-Eyes, and the Ables. The Ables are the actual competent people. And they're one of the main belligerent forces in World War III. And what Christine Lagarde is saying here in this interview is that you have to shut off the off ramps, the exit ramps, because the able people will do it, right? They'll form a constituency using Bitcoin if you don't shut it down. Now, remember, her plan is to go around the world with Janet Yellen and get the whole world to agree on all these stupid things. What do you think their ability to do it is? Well, they're starting. Here's what we find out from the IMF, right? This is from yesterday as well. The IMF demands Pakistan impose capital gains tax on Bitcoin and crypto investments in order to receive a $3 billion aid package. So I think you're going to see more of this in the following few months. I saw Milei yesterday asked for a little top up with the IMF. I think the IMF is going to start making its loans contingent on exactly what they're demanding Pakistan here. Shut down the tax loopholes that allow people to exit. So this is, I think, their whole plan right now. Pakistan, I don't really care what team they're on. Axis, Allies, Ables, it doesn't matter to me, right? They're not really a player in this game as far as I can tell. So let them have their $3 billion. I don't care if they put all this stuff. The important ones are Japan, right? So this is what happened yesterday in Japan. So yesterday in Japan, for the first time in years, there was a huge package of deflationary or inflationary incentives. They raised salaries across the board because Japan has not been existing in this world. They finally pushed interest rates from negative into positive territory. It's the first time this has happened in a while. Now, in case anyone is new here, I used to live in Japan. I was in Japan the moment Bitcoin was created. I was in Japan in 08, 09, working as a lawyer. I've spent a lot of time in my life in Japan. I follow the central bank stuff there very closely. I'm a Japanophile. So, my wife is half Japanese. I spend a lot of time over there. Big fan. Follow things closely. It's another type of home to me. Korea as well. France as well. So I've spent time in all these different places and think of myself as a local in them, including here in Barbados. But here's what we found out from yesterday in Japan. The Bank of Japan just raised interest rates for the first time in 17 years. Here are the implications for global markets. This comes from Macro Alf. He says the Bank of Japan decided to raise interest rates a meager yet still historical 10 basis points. The short-term policy range in Japan is now 0.1%. So we're not dealing with a huge interest rate. It went from 0 to 0.1. Governor Ueda is highlighting why in his press conference. And this is what emerges so far. A stable 2% inflation target is getting within range in Japan due to healthy wage pressures. Recently, the largest Japanese labor unions secured wage increases north of 5% for their workers. These are amongst the highest levels seen in decades. The Bank of Japan is mulling reducing its purchases of Japanese government bonds in the near future, so none of this stuff is that important. The important thing here is what happens next. But accommodative conditions are still necessary for Japan, and the pace of upcoming rate hikes will depend on incoming data and how comfortable authorities are that inflation is durably around 2%. So to understand whether Japan will continue with hikes, one should watch economic data, particularly services inflation, and on the April set of forecasts that the BOJ will issue at the next meeting. But taking a step back, why does Japan matter so much for global markets in the first place, right? Now, one of the things that I constantly have been saying is that Satoshi Nakamoto used the Japanese pseudonym in 08 to tell America that you are Japan now. You are Japan. You are going to experience what Japan has experienced for years. And because you're now Japan, it's opened the door to this. And I believe the Japanese pseudonym. Now, I'm totally mind reading. This is all speculation, right? I have a weird memory of reading this explained in 2012, and I've never been able to find it. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was a dream. But that the Japanese pseudonym was used to have the sort of moral authority to tell America that they know what's coming. They know what's coming. Because if Bitcoin wasn't created in 08, then for sure, the Chinese yuan renminbi would be taking up the void left by the failure of the US dollar. And if that happened, it would be game over. If that happened, World War III would be the Allies versus the Axis or the Gs, right? So you wouldn't have this off-ramp. You wouldn't have any way for the Ables to express a preference, a political preference of separating money and state, which we're now clearly signaling is our desire, right? So here's the important part. This is what Macro Alf says. Japanese investors are among the biggest capital exporters in the world. They own $1 trillion in treasuries and $500 billion in euro bonds. As domestic yields have been depressed for so long, Japanese investors look for ways to invest abroad to generate higher returns. Authorities have removed negative interest rates for Japan, and perhaps more hikes are coming. Now, the domestic yields in Japan might be on the rise, Will they stop investing in foreign bonds? Let's take a quick look at the attractiveness of foreign bonds for Japanese investors, right? When Japanese investors buy treasuries, they must swap existing Japanese yen for USD first, which means they would run FX risks. They don't want that, so they hedge it. When looking at investing in 10-year treasuries, after hedging USD JPY risks for 12 months, Japanese buyers see this. USD treasuries are among the most expensive in decades for Japanese investors. They have been so for quarters now. Now, what happens if the Bank of Japan keeps raising interest rates, making domestic bond investments more attractive for Japanese investors on top? This is why developments in Japan matter for global markets. Japanese are huge exporters of capital, and changing domestic conditions can affect their behavior in global markets. Another potential source of macro volatility is to assess carefully. So here's the thing. Here's what he's basically saying. The risk here with Japanese moves is that they will no longer buy USD treasuries. There's other options. And if they're not buying USD treasuries, he's only here signaling that they might buy Japanese treasuries. Maybe they'll do that. Or maybe they'll do what we heard yesterday, that Japan's $1.4 trillion state pension fund, the largest in Japan, apparently, is going to explore adding Bitcoin to its portfolio. Now, are these things a coincidence? I don't think they are. I don't think they're a coincidence at all. They're not a lucky coincidence anyway. This is Japanese people strategically realizing that their own Ginkgo Japan, their own Bank of Japan, and their government colluding together for years is at a dead end. And they've known it for a long time. It's the same dead end the Americans are going to come to. The Japanese are no longer going to participate in the U.S. bond auctions. They're not going to be buying U.S. bonds anymore to the extent they have been, because there's other options now. And if the Japanese want to preserve their position, if they want to preserve their wealth, if they want to counter what's been going on for decades now, they've got to do something totally different. They have to completely reinvent the battle plan. Now, they invented this original system of manipulating their currency in order to have an export-driven economy so that America would buy their stuff. It's what China learned from and copied. But they're the originators of this. Korea also copied this. I've said before, I learned so much about Forex when I lived in Korea the first time, just by talking to people who were like, well, what do you mean you don't wait for your foreign conversion of money? What about the different rates? What about the better rates you can get? You can get more US dollars if you wait for the right time. We all talk about it all the time. I had no idea that world existed because I never had to trade foreign currency before. I didn't understand what was going on. So this was a big lesson to me. People, foreigners, for example, were always trying to find a way to get their money out. This is pre-Bitcoin, right? How do we get it out without paying tax? Friends would attach cash to their body and lie at the FATF $10,000 thing when they entered the country. So there were all kinds of strategies out there. But now it looks like Japan is going to embrace something new. Max Kaiser said, this has been the linchpin currency in the global free money carry trade for 30 years. This raise in rates in Japan will be seen by future historians as the seminal moment in the slow collapse of the modern central bank era, right? And I think that's what's happening. That's the reason why this huge Japanese pension is now interested in Bitcoin, because they have very few other options. They must embrace the very off-ramp, the very exit ramp that the Christine Lagarde warned against. Now, do you think that stupid Christine Lagarde and Janet Yellen are going to be able to go over to Japan and fool the Japanese people? Of course not, right? The Japanese don't need to play the American game. They never really played it to the same extent that Americans and Europeans have. They have a completely different worldview. They're completely self-obsessed, right, which is their own prerogative and their own business. And they've resisted, for example, all of these condemnations about their inability to be multicultural, right? They didn't care about any of that stuff. And I believe this will be the same effect. They're not going to care about any of these Christine Lagardes coming around telling them this and that. They are a true sovereign nation of a people that are, I think anyway, going to embrace the sovereignty more and more, are going to de-risk from the Americans more and more. And this de-risking from America is really what we're talking about, right? What we're talking about here, again, going back to what Beauty On talked about, right? This Ables versus All Eyes, the Don Lemon mentally handicapped people versus actual people who are capable of logic and reason and prediction and understanding the consequences of their actions and all of these things. That's why predictions are so important. That's why we do predictions here. If you're not predicting with your worldview, what's the point of having a worldview? What's the point? You take your worldview to say, well, this is where things are headed, and I'm going to go that way. Even this show, the reason why I can do a show every single day is because I'm just sharing it's the same worldview. I just take the news and I bounce it off of my worldview and we have a show, right? I don't have to do anything more than just share my initial thoughts to whatever story I find interesting. And they all seem to fit together because I have a coherent worldview, which allows me to make predictions, right? It's the worldview that is the engine for making these predictions. And that's why I like to do them publicly, right? It's kind of like, if you never put skin in the game, if you never gamble with actual money and you think you can predict every sports outcome, you can convince yourself, if you're not actually betting, that you always get it right. The minute you bet, the game changes and you start to see how good or bad you are at actually predicting the outcome. Now, sports is actual gambling because anything can happen, right? But when I do it here, what I'm trying to do is make sure I'm saying these things in public so that I can gauge how good I am at predicting. I'm good. I knew I was good before, but I'm good at predicting. So that's one of the things, don't want to sound like a douche, but that's what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to make sure that the worldview that I'm sharing, that I'm bouncing all of these stories off, is coherent, consistent, and predicts. If it doesn't predict, we got a problem. Now, I heard these reports that Vivek is not going to be the vice president. They seem kind of low credibility to me, right? I don't even know who was citing it. It was published in Zero Hedge. So I'm still going to say Vivek is the VP. Did you see he showed up at David Bailey's, who is the owner of Bitcoin Magazine? He showed up at his house on Saturday night for a Bitcoin party. So we can guarantee he's going to be at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. You can get your tickets. You can get your tickets with my promo code, which is in the description. It is promo code SpaceDrop. You hear a lot about airdrops these days. It is not an airdrop. It's not an airdrop at all. It's something totally different. It's something Don Lemon should learn about. It's something completely different than an airdrop. Airdrops are fun. Space drops will be fun as long as you're not the one dropping. But Space Drop is my promo code. You can use it for Bitcoin Nashville, July 25th to 27th, or Bitcoin Asia, May 9th and 10th. So there you go. Use the promo code if you want to get a deal. So going back to this idea of places like Japan trying to de-risk from America and the threat America holds, the bifurcation of what's happening in America. And you can kind of see this bifurcation based in the end on this bimetallic idea. And that's why you can see proof throughout that Bitcoiners, for example, in El Salvador, where you already have bimetallism, you probably already have a clear bifurcation of the people. You've got Bukele hosting yesterday a health and fitness retreat with a lot of Bitcoiners involved, right? So we had Pleb Cruz, Dr. Jack Cruz there saying, how do you know when you are over the target in centralized medicine and healthcare? They are doing everything they can to muzzle what you do for the public good. Who wants to follow a guy who wrote the first ever medical freedom law for El Salvador? Fact checkers employed by Meta and their WEF co-conspirators must be more credible as to trump what a freely elected nation-state leader, won in a landslide, thinks, who is constantly winning in a world that Meta is destroying with their propaganda. So Jack Cruz the context here is that when you follow him now on Facebook, there's a warning, right? So there you go. Who thinks consistently winning in a world of Meta is destroying it with their propaganda. You have to ask, if you're decentralized, who is more credible? President Bukele, who turned his country from a gang-riddled murder capital of the world to the safest country in the world in 5 years, or fact checkers from Meta who are paid by Soros? You also had Edwin Le Carre there, who's another Bitcoiner. He's the guy who can hold his breath for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes or something. So there you go. You get these really interesting, really interesting real visions of the future when you see this focus on health. Bukele spoke at this event in El Salvador. He has this new sort of medical initiative all about health. Now, remember what he did in COVID. He was literally the only world leader who says, go out, get some sun, go out and get be healthy, exercise. That's the best way to combat against COVID. No need for vaccines and all that stuff. So an amazing sort of contrast, right? You've also got Milei, right? Another place that's embracing this bimetallism over in Argentina. Now, he's asking for IMF money, so don't be surprised if they ask for some kind of Bitcoin special tax because of Christine Lagarde's off-ramp. So we'll see what he says when it comes time. But now he's out there talking about the Cuban son of a bitch regime, right? Now, what did I tell you was going to happen? That you had these Spanish speakers, Bukele and Milei, just constantly smashing this Latin American worldview. It's going to change Latin America big time. It's going to change Latin America so much that I continue to predict that the thoughts that come out of these able people from South America are actually going to play a huge role in them kind of rescuing America. I think in the history books, the same way that America took a lot of pride in being the D-Day rescuers of Europe, I think South America is going to be able to get a bit of that shine when it comes to America. I think they're going to save America. I think they are. And so he comes out now going on about Cuba. He says, "Hi, I'm Javier Milei, a liberal libertarian, and this message is for all the Cuban brothers who are waking up to the ideas of freedom. They're rebelling against that son of a bitch regime that is screwing up their lives. So don't give up your fight for freedom. Freedom will bring you prosperity, well-being, and above all, much happiness. So Cuban brothers, do not give in. It is your time to move forward. Live." Now, I love Cuba, not the stupid country, the government and all that, but it is absolutely one of the most beautiful, physically beautiful, amazing places you can go. I've been many times in my life. I got engaged. I asked my wife to marry me in Cuba. I used to do this really fun trip every year where we would go and rent this little campground spot, and then I would rent an old 50s car and I'd drive into Havana, and we'd stay in a little townhouse in Havana and then go back to the beach and camp. But a really nice place, right? I mean, just physically, there's no island in the Caribbean like it. It's amazing. It's enormous and beautiful, and mountains and everything grows. It's just absolute heaven on earth, right? I love the island I'm on, but it's very small, and that's okay. But you got to get stuff in. You can't produce everything here. Cuba's large enough to be self-sustainable. It's large enough to not require all of these inputs. It's an amazing place, and everyone wants to see Cuba Libre, and everybody wants to see it freed and a great place. And now this guy is one of the first Spanish speaking leaders you've heard in a long time, directly calling it evil, directly inciting rebellion amongst the people, calling them a son of a bitch regime. It's just perfect, right? So again, the ables are getting engaged here, right? And we're starting to perceive where the risk comes from, where the danger comes from. You know, this case that I saw with the SEC called the debt box case that came out yesterday. This shows you, listen to what the judge says about the SEC. And I think this is what's going to catch on in order for us to perceive where the risks really come from. Remember, once we perceive that the risks come from government, that the risks are from the self-funded, fiat-funded, brainwashing industrial complex that gets most things wrong. Once Americans perceive where the real risks are, once the world perceives where the risks come from, centralized power and control and its ability to print money, we'll have a completely different idea. Biology will kick in to make us afraid of the very thing, right? We're literally going to scale the correct, let's call it perception of where danger comes from. Right? We're going to scale what we understand about risk with Bitcoin. And the SEC is going to help us along the way, right? So I've been saying that the Jarkissi case is going to destroy the SEC. I think the Supreme Court is going to rule in the way that I've predicted. But this is from Meta Law Man, and he's talking here. This is a crypto case, but you got to understand the corruption of the SEC here, right? And remember, to stop the off-ramp, remember what Janet Yellen, just like stupid Christine Lagarde said, right? We got to stop the off-ramps. That's why when Janet Yellen went to Congress the other day, she said, "Oh, we've got to tax crypto that aren't securities. We've got to regulate crypto that's not securities at the SEC level," right? What's a crypto that's not a security? It's Bitcoin, of course, right? Of course it's Bitcoin. So she goes and pulls that stuff. But here's what we know about the SEC. The judge in the debt box case has issued an 80-page opinion sanctioning the SEC for egregious misconduct in the case. The opinion is devastating to the SEC as an institution and to the particular lawyers who committed the misconduct. The judge made it crystal clear that the SEC lawyers did not make an error. They lied intentionally. In an opinion that will surely be cited by litigants across the country for years to come, the judge found that the critical evidence The commission offered to obtain and defend the ex parte TRO lacked any basis in fact, yet the commission nonetheless advanced the evidence in deliberately false and misleading ways. The SEC engaged in a gross abuse of power entrusted to it by Congress. The SEC undermined the integrity of the judicial process. The judge has ordered the SEC to pay the attorney's fees and the defendants in the case. This is a sad day. Is it? I don't know. The SEC was once a great institution, respected around the globe for its competence and integrity. Now it's time for accountability. The judge from the SEC engaged in a gross abuse of power. Will Congress do anything about this? Now, here's the interesting thing about the SEC outlaws, right? Oh, dang, I missed one of these quotes about Don Lemon being the stupidest man in media. We'll get to that later. Didn't he prove it, by the way? I'll get back to the SEC in a second. But I forgot even to share my opinion about Don Lemon for a second. So here's what Jose Rosado says. Don Lemon is the most stupid man in media. Trump said it, and now we can all see it. You know what? Isn't that true? Have you ever seen a bigger wasted opportunity in your life? Have you ever seen someone waste a bigger opportunity? If Don Lemon would have become a whistleblower, let's say, on CNN and its antics, if he just would have had like a hangout with Elon, got all the same stuff he got, right? Depression. I mean, I don't really like asking people about medicine, but if he didn't do the gotcha low IQ journalism thing, he'd have probably made 10 to 20, 15, $30 million a year. All he had to do was not be a fucking asshole. That's it. He couldn't do it. He absolutely couldn't do it. And now, I mean, what's going to happen to him? Is he going to go back on the fake news and they're going to hire him because he did one Elon interview that sucked and it had very few views on YouTube and nobody cares and it's very, very low quality thing, and now it's over for him, right? So is there any way that have you ever seen anyone waste an opportunity like this in your life? Again, that's why we're dealing with mentally handicapped people versus able people, and that's why we are bifurcating. No one has been given a bigger chance to stack sats and do stuff like what was just offered to Don Lemon. Nobody. I mean, imagine you get a receptive Elon Musk and you waste it on this shit and you're done, right? You're done. No one will ever take this guy seriously. It's impossible, irredeemable. So let's go back to the SEC piece, right? And what we see about that, about them being completely corrupted, completely out of their minds, and what's going on, right? So here's what I think. When you go to the SEC and you start realizing where the threats, where all of this stuff comes from, and this is starting to change perception about who's dangerous and who's risky and these kinds of things, right? And what I'm saying now is the ables are able to perceive that the threats actually come from the all eyes, the centralized nation states like United States and Canada and all of their institutions built on censorship, psyops, manipulation, and things like that. Now, one of the things I said to you from years ago, before RFK even ran for president, right? I said the minute we were getting into the Kennedy assassination topics again, I said that RFK was going to have a role to play in the 2024 elections. Before he ran, I was predicting it on this show that he would run because of Elon Musk's idea that we live in a soap opera or a simulation and the most entertaining outcome is the most likely, right? So now imagine we get this crusade of RFK to stop the corrupt merger of government and corporate power. And weirdly, the SEC was created by his own grandfather. It's his own grandfather who created it, right? So indeed, as Kennedy makes his way in this race, we're going to be able to see, and we're starting to see it, where this corruption stuff comes from. He is squarely footed to be able to deal with the legacy and history of the SEC. He is the most likely person, based on the most entertaining outcome is the predictive lens you should look at this stuff in. He is the most likely person to destroy the SEC. Now, I continue to think that RFK will play a role like Attorney General in a Trump administration. He won't be the vice president. He's not going to be on a ticket with him, right? It's just not going to happen. But the Democrat Party is going to collapse. It's going to not be existent basically anymore. They're going to be hanging on by a thread of just mentally ill women supporting this party, because all the men are leaving, the black men are leaving, the Latino men are leaving, because the Democrat Party is becoming seen as the threat, right? And it's got all these mental health issues, and none of these things are opinions. Like I don't actually think that any Democrat opinion is political. It's really just the result of psyops and the mental illness that it propagates, right? So again, it's why we're dealing with this bifurcation. We're dealing with the results of the all lies and the mentally ill people they cultivate versus able people who are able to resist the brainwashing and are able to see things clearly without the psychological manipulation, right? So go back to Kennedy, right? So Kennedy did another one of these interviews with Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo, who's doing much better on his own than Don Lemon did. So I kind of thought Don Lemon would go the way of Chris Cuomo. That didn't happen, right? Remember, all Don Lemon had to do, all he had to do was just not be a CNN shill. And who fired him? And he would be fine. He'd be making a fortune, right? Couldn't do it. So Chris Cuomo is asking Kennedy about the Biden St. Patrick's Day family pictures, and listen to Kennedy's answer. Listen to what we're dealing with here, and you're talking about ables and people. Listen to this. He says, "I understand many of them disagree with me on the war in Ukraine. They disagree with me on COVID, and some of them on public health. They disagree with me on free speech. They disagree with each other in a friendly way and still love each other." He went on to share a heartfelt message in response to his family visit to the White House, but added that it is that he is hopeful they in turn gave a message to the president. He says, "They looked very happy in that photograph, and you know it's very exhilarating. It's intoxicating being in the White House. I'm glad I played a role, I think, in facilitating that visit to the White House and bringing them all such happiness. I'm happy about that," he says. I do hope, this is what he says, "I do hope at least a couple of them took the time to talk to President Biden and ask him to provide me with Secret Service protection. That's my hope." Imagine, he's still not getting Secret Service protection. How many months away are we from the election? 6 months? Oh, what are we? The third month, March, November 10th, 7 months or something? Yeah, 7 months away, 6.5 months. We're 6.5 months away. He's polling in 20%, and what does he get? No Secret Service protection. Why? It's as disgusting as it looks. It's as absolutely as disgusting as it looks. And wasn't this the perfect way to handle it? Right? It's just perfect. Like, this is what you want from a leader. This is why it's a kind of monarchistic campaign. This is why he'll have the moral authority to bring the remnants of the mentally ill Democrat Party together in order to tell them and break the news to them just how bad and devastating this brainwashing was for their mental health. So he's in a very unique position, and I think he's going to do great. And that's a big reason why, right? But now go back to Kennedy playing a role, right? Not only is he going to play a role with the Democrat mentally ill people, not only is he going to play a role in dismantling the SEC and dismantling the corrupt merger of state and corporate power. Go back to the Kennedy assassination for a second. Now, this is something that I heard before, but people are talking about it more and more now. And I think, it's, I don't know, but I think it's real. So people are saying that the Zapruder film, of course, the famous Zapruder film that shows Kennedy being assassinated, you know when that came out? Does anyone know? It came out in 1977. Now look at the images, right? It's hilarious. When you look at it again, just look at the images. First of all, as Kennedy's brains are getting blown out, right, this way, right? Remember, the shot was supposed to have come from behind. What you got to see is the driver. He's just going along, right? And then you look behind Kennedy, and what do you see? There's no bottom to the tree. There's no bottom to a tree. It's just gone. There's no bottom to the tree, right? Now, apparently, now this goes to what Trump said, that Napolitano quote has come out, which is the quote where Trump said to him, remind me to release all the Kennedy files. And then in the last days of the Trump administration, Judge Napolitano says, when are you going to release them? You got to release them. He says, if you'd see what I saw, you wouldn't do it, right? And there's rumors now out there that what you'll actually see from the true Zapruder film, so that's what people are talking about. There's two Zapruder films, the 77 doctored fake version, right? And the real version, which is the driver turns around and just shoots him in the head, right? Now, I'd heard that before. I heard that from the very person who told me that LBJ did the deed or was involved in the cover up, and this was a person who had a lot of idea. This person is a Canadian senator, if anyone wants to know. Pretty credible person in my book, and a Catholic. So in the same way, his whole time when he was in the Canadian Senate and I would go in his office and all that, he would have JFK's portrait up on the wall next to the Queen, because he is the reason why he was in politics. The reason he loved politics was because Kennedy inspired him as a little kid. So here we go, right? I told you that the Kennedy assassination story was going to come back big time in 2024. And it will absolutely change our perception of where risks come from. It's going to change our idea of history, our entire idea of history. We're going to understand that we haven't had civilian control of the government since then. We haven't, right? Kennedy is going to be there to help lead people through this difficult time for them. If they are filled with the mental illness that comes from following the All Eyes, you're going to need someone to hold your hand. And this is the guy, I think, who's going to help a lot of Americans understand exactly what happened, because they did it to his dad, they did it to his uncle, which is why he's been vaccinated from the conspiracy theorists label, which is what I predicted was going to happen, right? The original thought I had on him is that because of his dramatic family history, he was indeed vaccinated from the conspiracy theorist tag. Right. Most thinking people say, well, you're allowed to ask some questions about stuff. All right. When all this happens, you don't have to believe the official line. But indeed, it's going to help us reshape our perceptions about where risk comes from. And in this very low trust environment, everything is feeding that right now. You saw this Obama went to the British Prime Minister's house yesterday. Everything about that looks sketchy. Everything about it looks sketchy. I mean, really sketchy. Watching Obama walk in, there's something going on, right? You got the thing with the royals in the UK right now. I don't know anything about it, right? But that picture yesterday where they tried to show Kate walking around, that looked also fake, right? Now, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. American perceptions of where risk comes from, who's lying, are basically so different than they were 4 years ago, 8 years ago, pre-COVID, pre-Trump. We're nowhere near that old world. And here's the big story that is coming, right? Here's the actual big story. And this is incredible if you haven't heard about this. So I'll start by just saying the New York Post admitted yesterday that Google has interfered in U.S. elections to help Democrats 41 times since 2008, right? So there you go. It's 41 times, right? But here's what we know. Yesterday, a lawyer for Patrick Byrne, who I've met many times, Patrick Byrne, the Overstock CEO, was a major Bitcoiner, right? So I met him many times in the early days of Bitcoin. He was around for the 2014, 2015 crash. And if you're around at that time, one of the most amazing things about that market, the bear market of 2014, 2015, the worst bear market there ever was, I think. This one was pretty bad. It was sort of on par with that 2014, 2015 one. That was the wake of the Mt. Gox collapse. It was a very dark time for the industry. Now, I didn't care because I was entering the industry, and because it was so low energy, it was an easy access. I met every CEO of every exchange. They were all going to conferences, right? All these people were just accessible, right? I would go to these shows. They're all there. I would meet everyone, talk to everyone. It was easy to access all these people. So Patrick Byrne was one of these people who was just hanging out. He was just hanging out in the bear market. And he had a lot of credibility because he had $1 million company in his own. We thought he was interesting. He was the Michael Saylor of that time in a lot of ways, right? We loved him. If you got him to keynote your event, it was like cool, right? So in a show that I programmed for the 10-year anniversary of Bitcoin in 2019, we put on a show at CoinDesk in New York City. And I had Adam Back and Patrick Byrne end the show, just reflections on 10 years of Bitcoin, a dev and a business guy. It was a great session. They had a great time, right? So that was 2019. In 2020, Patrick Byrne gets arrested, and we find out that he's been blackmailed by the deep state in order to get dirt on Trump. And all of this stuff comes out. Now, he becomes persona non grata. He becomes don't go near this guy. He tried to be Sailor. Well, I mean, it was a different time. I don't know if he tried to be Sailor, He tried to be himself. And Sailor, there was a role for that at the time, and he had a lot of ideas and all that stuff, right? We always knew these rich people would show up, but he was the one we had at the time, and it was great. He was trying to put everything in overstock into Bitcoin, all this kind of fun stuff. So what ends up happening is we find out that he was actually a deep state plant for years and was getting blackmailed for years on all kinds of things. And this was a big revelation, right? So what ends up happening is he gets this, I don't know what you want to call it, but a moral conscience about everything that happened with Trump and everything. So he goes on a personal crusade to fix US 2020 elections. He's one of the guys who now has a huge following on locals, a huge following on Rumbles. He has been tracking the election thing as much as the MyPillow guy, right? He's been involved as just an able citizen trying to debunk any claims that the 2020 election was legit. What happened yesterday is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Let me get the quotes here. Here's what we got, right? So the headline in the fake news is the following: pro-Trump Michigan attorney arrested after hearing in DC over leaked Dominion documents, right? So the AP is trying to tell you, this is what the AP is saying. So I'm going to tell you what the AP says. I'm going to tell you what everyone else says. An attorney facing criminal charges for illegally accessing Michigan voting machines after the 2020 election was arrested Monday after a hearing in a separate case in federal court in Washington, D.C. So Patrick Byrne's lawyer is called Stephanie. His name's Stephanie Lambert. Stephanie Lambert was arrested by U.S. Marshals after hearing over possible sanctions against her for disseminating confidential emails from Dominion voting systems. So they've arrested her yesterday for sharing emails about Dominion. Okay. The target of conspiracy theories over former President Trump's 2020 election loss. Lambert obtained the Dominion emails by representing Patrick Byrne, a prominent funder of election conspiracy theorists, who was being sued by Dominion for defamation. In a statement, the Marshal's office said Lambert was arrested on local charges. A Michigan judge earlier this month issued a bench warrant for Lambert after she missed a hearing in her case, in which she's charged with 4 felonies for accessing voting machines in a search for evidence for a conspiracy theory against Trump. Lambert had earlier unsuccessfully sued to overturn Trump's loss in Michigan. But here's what we know. Right? We found out that the Dominion security machines had the actual cryptographic keys on them. Anyone could access them. Apparently, anyone in the world who knew what they were doing was able to get into those machines and fudge the results. And what would you find out? Was there any way to audit this? Never. So what we know is the machines are unauditable. Anyone could have had access. Now, Bitcoiners, as I always say, have a huge role to play in this, just like Patrick Byrne, because we understand cryptographic key management. We understand auditability. We understand don't trust, verify. If we scale the mimetic force of don't trust, verify, we will destroy American perceptions about election integrity. You don't need to prove from a physical thing that it's done. What you need to show is that it's unauditable, that you couldn't tell if there was a scam. That's all you need to do. You don't need to say there definitely was a scam and it was this person on this day and they did this and they did that. Nope. All you need to do is explain that the system itself cannot be verified. And that's enough. If you understand that don't trust, verify is super foundational for election systems as it is for money, then you'll understand what happened in the 2020 election. And here's what we know, right? So Steph Lambert says, I gave evidence to law enforcement. The discovery file from Dominion contained evidence of numerous crimes. The Constitution does not permit secret Serbians to run our elections. Local clerks are to run our elections, and transparency is prevented by vendors. Election integrity force, disturbing assault on the Republic. Attorney Stephanie Lambert arrested amidst revelations of Dominion voting systems misconduct. But here's what we know about the keys, right? Let me find the stuff on the keys. I wanted to show you the key stuff. Here. Supreme Court case filed will shock the world. Decryption keys found in voting machines. It is like a bank telling the public that they have the most secure vault in the world and then taping the combination on the wall next to the vault door. Even worse, key logging features that would record system activity showing such control can also be manipulated or disabled, thereby rendering any penetration of the system utterly undetectable, right? So again, one of the main things Bitcoiners can do here is show that the all eyes are promoting an election system that cannot be verified. We don't even know if we had an election in 2020. Forget about who won. We don't know if we had an election, right? So this whole thing here, this whole thing to me shows that people like RFK, people like Vivek can show us, Milei, Bukele, show us where the risk is coming from in America, that it's coming from the all eyes. Once we perceive where the risk is coming from and we apply that understanding to elections with the mimetic knowledge of don't trust, verify, Bitcoiners are actually in a position in this election style to destroy federal issuance of money, the corruption of the merger of money and state, and we can actually separate money from state in this cycle. And it's the bifurcation that Beauty On was talking about. It is bimetallism. It's going to happen now. It's going to happen this cycle. We're going to create an off-ramp for Bitcoiners, for anyone who perceives this problem. The people who are not Don Lemon, the people who perceive where the threat is coming from, are going to be powered up by their understanding of election systems. Now, they can be stolen again. I'll admit that. They can absolutely be stolen again. The biggest red herring we should all be focused on is that someone like Biden doesn't even look concerned. Right? Does Trudeau look concerned in Canada? Dominion's from Canada, right? I knew in 2015, I knew the election was a complete and total scam. That's the one that brought Trudeau to power. I knew it, right? It was obvious. The places he was winning in didn't make any sense, right? So now I don't have any proof. I have zero proof. Zero. It was my perception before we knew what happened in 2020. I didn't know about Dominion voting systems at the time. I didn't know about any of that, right? I just knew that it did not jive with the reality that I was perceiving on the ground. And I have a lot of traction or coverage in Canada, let's say. I'm in Quebec at the time. I'm in Toronto all the time. I was in Ottawa all the time. I was, going around the whole St. Lawrence region and Great Lakes region. And in 2015, I was already into Bitcoin fully. I'd already left Parliament, but it didn't make sense to me what was happening. And it's rare. I can usually say, I'm usually not surprised. I had Trump's win in 2016 predicted from the moment he made the Mexican rapist speech. The minute and remember, he made the Mexican rapist speech at a time when people didn't think he was going to actually run. They thought it was a publicity stunt. I said, no. He's running and he's going to win. I was saying that from June or whatever, May 2015 on. I never, ever relinquished the idea. I was bullish on it. The only day, there was probably one day in all of 2015 and 2016 where I doubted his capacity to win, and that was the Billy Bush grab her by the Sunday, right? That was the one day I was like, yeah. I had my grandmother's funeral that day, and I met an old friend at the cemetery in a random weird part of, it was, 500 miles away from where I knew this person. She was there. Her dad had just died. She was like a guest at my wedding, a friend of mine, a liberal, but a friend of mine. And it was just a weird coincidence that she was there. So we went out for a little snack after and caught up and were chatting. And I hadn't seen her since my wedding, which was only a year earlier. And that day I was like, I don't know if he's going to win. I don't know. That was a funeral. I was a little low energy and depressed. And I loved my grandmother and blah, blah, blah. So, that was literally the only day. I had my grandmother's funeral on the Billy Bush Sunday. And on that day, I was like, maybe, fuck, he's going to lose, God damn it. But that's the one day. The next day, remember, there was the debate the next day. And that's where he brought he brought the Clinton rape accusers and sat them in the front row, and he fought back big time. And I was like, no. He's going to win. That's where he came up with the famous, you go to jail. We're glad we don't have a person like you in the White House. Yeah, because you'd be in jail. Now, I always thought the jail thing, lock her up, was a bad idea. I think it's what's led him here, but I think he'd have been here anyway, right? So who knows? But anyway, with elections, with the perception of what's a risk, I think Bitcoiners are going to have a huge and disproportionate impact in the 2024 election. Indeed, we're bifurcating. It's sad. what are we going to do about it? Hopefully it only lasts a generation. Hopefully we can fix it. I hope so. I pray we can fix it in a generation. I pray that the mental incapacity and the mental retardation that's been spread by the psyops and the brainwashing is going to be easily curable. Biology might kick in, right? It really might. Once perceptions of danger are truly viewed and focused, I think it'll change, but we'll see. All right, let's see what people say in the comments. All right. No, I don't. So again, Roy Kokup, I don't think the Zero Hedge article is real. I don't know, but I don't know who BBG, who are they quoting? BBG. Everyone I asked who shared it with me, I said, who's BBG? And no one can answer it, right? So if someone can tell me who BBG is, then I'll have a better idea. The lemons of the world, force them on learning Bitcoin. We can't force anyone, Connector. This is a personal responsibility mission, and it's low violence, right? So we don't need to force them. They'll be forced, hopefully, by their biology, or they will die. You know. So there you go. Now let's see what folks are saying over here. Let's see. Let me go back. Bitcoiners are the White Walkers. Yeah. Smells like a setup. Won't put it past Biden cabal. Yeah. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Yeah, man. Read this book, Movil Wave. Yeah. I don't see heaven on earth with the amount of NPCs growing. They'll trade anything for convenience. Yeah, but the excuse for being an NPC is getting less and less. Or not an NPC. The excuse for not seeing where risk is getting less and less. Lemon can't take that opportunity. Yeah, Stone, you got it. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. It might be the blackmail thing. You're right. You know, basically, anytime now I've come to believe this. Anytime you see something where someone is so stupid that it couldn't possibly be real, you got to put blackmail in. I hadn't thought of that. Thanks. I went with the bias that Don Lemon really is that dumb. In his case, it might be true. He might actually be. I don't know. I hope not. I didn't think he was. I thought you were going to see a totally reinvented Don Lemon. In the end, you're right. He might actually be that stupid. He might actually be blackmailed. Right. All right. People are buying Master, right? People are buying Master. We love Master. Hold on. Buy the dip, indeed. Bitcoiners, otherwise, today is the dippity dip of dips, 100 to 1. A lot of people talking about Master. Bought at just the right time. Good for you guys. Very good for you guys. JFK until today. Lawlessness has consequences. It sure does. It sure does. Every day walking with Christ. Nolan or Scott Adams. Scott wants to be Secretary of Debunking Hoaxes. Yeah, he'd be the best at that. He'd be the best at that. Adams is a normie? Not exactly. He talks about Bitcoin every now and again. What he's missing is it's not part of his worldview. That's all he's missing. It's literally why I thought there was room for my show, because I'm a big Scott Adams show lover. I wanted to do more or less his model. I think his model is going to actually catch on. I think more people are going to do the news the way I do it, worldview sharing with stories bouncing against it and but literally the reason why I thought this show would work is because I would add Bitcoin fundamentally to it, and I thought that brought a lot out. So there you go. Could you imagine if Biden had to go explain the plan to the British PM? You're right. You're right. It's true. He was very pro Bitcoin. The computer scientist Epstein must get fined. Loads of research into Google manipulating ads to users depending upon site. Yeah. Yeah. Bitcoin Dominion highly contaminated with the fraud viruses. Yeah. Bitcoin ordinals. So Bitcoin ordinals for presidential elections, of course, of course. Well, I don't know about ordinals. No, it's just key signing. I wouldn't want to get too. I think paper and pen is fine. Of course, the blind Bitcoiner has reminded me that blind people do need to trust someone if they're going to vote, which I think we should do better at. So I think there could be a way to do key signing. But I don't understand. I wouldn't be the one to tell you the technical specs on that. I believe, a little bit the way Nostr works, probably, right? Of course, in Nostr, no one has an account. You have a key to sign things with, and people can read the things you signed. That's it, right? So there's no account. It's literally just like there's no Bitcoin accounts, right? You have a key signing ability, and that's Bitcoin. And then there's a database where the transactions are signed with the keys. So there's probably something in that, probably, but I don't know what it is. But I wish someone would create it. I know we're going to have Peter Todd talking about election integrity as a cryptographer, as one of these people, because he's a global expert. He'll go down and observe elections and things like that because of his knowledge of cryptography, which is how he was on the original mailing list for Satoshi and why he's been a core dev, or was an active core dev in the beginning. Nolan, did you watch Hidden Fortress by Kurosawa? It's got it all. Gold, Japan, precursor to stars. Of course I did. But it's been many, many years, but I loved it. I watched, many of Kurosawa's films as a teenager, and indeed loved it. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Follow the orange brick road. Indeed. We will reprogram the minds of the NPC. They will become Bitcoin NPC. Indeed, yeah. Well, my book, The Bitcoiner's Guide to the U.S. 2024 Elections, is about that. It's literally how to reprogram NPC minds around the election. Side note, your location looks amazing and reminds me I need some vitamin C. Yes, downtown Musen. For sure, man. What was the one treasury paper you mentioned? Treasury paper I mentioned. Let me see. What was the treasury paper? I was talking about Macro Alf is his name on Twitter, and he was sharing the BOJ treasury paper. I don't know if I was. And then there's the Christine Lagarde, IMF demands, Bank of Japan. Yeah, it was just the analysis by a fella named Macro Alf on X. Macro Alf on X. You mentioned you post the link in the show notes. I did for a little while, Ordinary Bitcoin, but getting those notes, it was from 2 days ago. Oh, yeah. I don't know, man. One of the compromises I have to make for timing to make the show work on this location is I have to cut down the time it takes to load the show up. And the biggest time suck in loading the show is loading up the Twitter handles of the people I'm citing in the day. I do it because some of them are big accounts. You kind of hope they'll share it on Twitter. It doesn't happen often enough, so I've canceled that for now. So we'll try and figure that out. But in general, I wish I had the bandwidth to turn it into a note accessible show. I just don't have. I don't have that. So, Rake Man has the corn now. I don't know. So I actually got a free membership here a couple years ago because I did a talk on Bitcoin in 2021 for the club, and they filled the place, and there was a couple hundred people, and I gave them really good alpha, so they gave me a free membership. So a lot of people here know what's going on. Again, another reason why I like Barbados. It's I was invited here to do Bitcoin stuff in 2018 already. A lot of people here know about it. It's like one of these finance islands. What kind of club is a beach club? A beach club, tennis, yachts. People will like. What's really cool is There's actually a viewer just 2 weeks ago had sailed from Africa. He's from France, but he's the Once Bitten podcast. A friend, he lives in his town, and so he's a fan of this show. He joins us. He actually sailed across the ocean, and I always catch people here. This is like one of the first stops because of where Barbados is. I meet a lot of people who literally are touching land for the first time after crossing the ocean here. Daniel, yeah. So he put him in touch. He came here. He like literally parked his boat, and it's hilarious. Like you're watching a breakup gang, member, and we're just sitting there over on another tree, and he just literally sailed across the ocean and arrived here. This is a regular stop, this club, so big boats can park out there, and you can use the services of the club, showers and all that kind of stuff. So boat, it's a yacht club. It's technically a yacht club, but I don't have a boat here or anything. I use it. This is really where all the homeschool kids hang out. It's not a hugely expensive club to join. But it's full of locals, and it's really nice. If I didn't have this, then it would be hard. I don't know if I would have ever enjoyed it. I just Googled that search. Yeah. You had a boating accident. I have so many boating accidents. Are you kidding me? I'm a major boating accident guy. Yeah. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Let me know how the broadcast went, quality, and not much I can do about it. I like the locale, though. I like the energy here, so we're probably going to keep continuing to do it here. But that's all I got. You guys all have a great day. I shall see you all tomorrow. Peace.